A little while ago, I put out a video about the mysterious petroglyphs in Chalk Creek near Fillmore, Utah, and I figured I would come up to Ogden, kind of just west of Ogden near the mouth of the canyon, to talk about the Ogden hieroglyphs. Now, these are equally unusual and just as strange. They aren't made in any Native American style that's recognizable, commonly, so they actually look like hieroglyphs. Now, there's a video by a man named Paul Bergen. It was filmed by Terry Carter, who's kind of a famous treasure hunter here in Utah, and he tells a really good story. And Paul Bergen says that he was shown these as a very small child in the 1950s. His father served in World War II and moved out here, and that when he was shown them, he figured he would come up here with a chisel and kind of clean some of them up. So he was very remorseful of this in the video, and he explained that he felt really bad about it. His interpretation, Bergen's, is that this is some form of Egyptian hieroglyphics. He says that 1/3 of these characters are directly translatable to hieroglyphs, 1/3 look similar to Egyptian hieroglyphs, and 1/3 are symbols that you can't find anywhere in hieroglyphs. My Sony camcorder here is pretty bad with the cold weather. It drains the battery very quickly, but just a bunch of conjecture on these. I have no idea how to read them. Some people claim that they have a book which tells them how to basically read Indian hieroglyphs, but you can imagine how much fun it is to interpret these. I mean, that looks like a flying saucer, that looks like rising in the west, because over to the left is the west after 3 days, because there's 3 kind of check marks there. You've got, looks like an empty cup, almost like a football, got a feather. That looks like a cross with a sort of arrow in it, pointing a direction. You got a foot, which means no walking, that's crossed through. You've got somebody looking hungry. He's holding his hand to his mouth, kind of a universal symbol of hunger. I've heard that there was a swastika there at one point that was chipped off, and that it was tried, the guy who accidentally chipped it off as he was touching it up, Paul Bergen, tried carving it down here somewhere, but there's no oxidation here. But basically the petroglyph, Paul Bergen said that it was a Navajo symbol, and the petroglyph for a swastika in the Navajo language, the symbol is called the whirling log. And as the world was sucked down, there were logs and someone jumped on them, and as they whirled down the drain as a sort of tornado or vortex, they formed a swastika. Now, swastika is also the Big Dipper that orbits around Polaris. And as the year passes, the 4 seasons, it would seem to look like a swastika. So this is just a Native American symbol. I have no idea what these petroglyphs mean, and I don't really want to conjecture on it, but it's very interesting to just look at them. And I don't know if they were made by Native Americans. I tend to believe that they were probably made by somebody over 100 years ago, because this has been a fixture on the community for decades. It's not very recent, but who knows? Huge mystery. And I hope that I'm not rustling anybody's jimmies by talking about this history. It's a fun story, and I just like storytelling, really. Now, I'm not trying to push any theories here. What I am trying to say is that a lot of theories exist, and they're very fun, specifically the signature of Moroni right there, which is also seen on a boulder that was fallen off of the wall near the Chalk Creek petroglyphs, so it might have been a part of that system, it might not have been, it might have also just been faked. Next to me is a strange rock found along the Chalk Creek not too far away from Fillmore by 2 prospectors in 1939. And I first heard the story of this actually talking to one of the curators at the Fillmore State House Museum back when Fillmore was the provincial capital of Utah. And she said that Moroni left his signature on the rock, and that's the story that a lot of people say about this rock. There's other rocks across Utah that don't appear to be Native American. They appear to be some form of writing, and there's 2 strange symbols on top of the rock. This one appears to be a Taoist signature, or the Taoist symbol, and the one here, apparently in Egyptian, the book How to Read Egyptian, the symbol like this, like a W, means mountain. And with an I over it, they say that that means the mountain of the Lord, which apparently is equated by some people with the angel Moroni, who revealed the plates to Joseph Smith in Palmyra, New York. Well, a lot of theorists say that these are Nephite, and that's something that I mentioned when I was down in the Chalk Creek area. Nephite being a tribe from the Book of Mormon that was traditionally believed to be in South America and then moved up after a war between the tribes and were basically refugees here in North America amongst the Lamanites. I have heard from Dan Lowe, who's a good friend of mine, that these petroglyphs, these hieroglyphs, were left by Jesse James. Now, I would like to bring up a theory that kind of is circumstantial evidence for this. Now, Jesse James was from Missouri, of course, and he was a very famous Confederate bushwhacker and partisan, and also, many people believe, Knights of the Golden Circle. Now, there were many different partisan groups and bushwhackers for the Confederates in the Civil War, but the Knights of the Golden Circle, their aim was to go far and wide, rob banks, and leave sort of supply caches and weapons and gold in different places around the West. In fact, there was a recent gold stash found, and this made the news very quickly. It was a huge just jar of gold coins, and there were also robberies of mines in Oregon that were also, the money was disappearing, and it probably went to the Confederates. Now, Jesse James, they believe, was killed, but, Dan Lowe says he went to Texas. Anyway, you could look at Harvey Logan, who was in the same general area as Jesse James. He wasn't with Jesse James's crew, but that area of Missouri was very popular with the Knights of the Golden Circle, which theoretically continued after the war. Now, this is not something that I necessarily believe or am advancing. It's just a theory I'm bringing up, and I'm going to put in Dan Lowe talking about it in just a moment. But there are dozens of these across the West, and you can see down at Chalk Creek, you can see in many different areas near Manti, petroglyphs that look just like this. And Dan Lowe's theory is that as Jesse James was coming and going up and down the river, he was contacting Native Americans, and he developed a sort of syllabary, or used their language, their petroglyphs, as a sort of code talker language. The Navajo did it in World War II. Why couldn't it have happened in the aftermath of the Civil War? So he believes these were Jesse James, but I would say that Harvey Logan was in the same general area. I would also say Harvey Logan killed a police officer, 2 of them, down in Manti, or down in Moab, and one of them is actually buried in the Ogden City Cemetery. So if you are to believe that these men from Missouri came out west, which many of them did, then this would make sense. This could be a coded message from Confederates leading to a supply cache, and certainly they have found caches of gold coins, and I think it's very fascinating. But I'll put in a little bit of Dan Lowe talking here, and by the way, we are just overlooking Ogden right now. I'll kind of show you how to get here. You leave 24th Street, you park in the Sunday school, and it's just a simple hike up the mountain. There's a boulder that kind of arches over like a crescent, and it's just off to the side of that. And really, really fascinating that there are dozens of these across the Wild West, and nobody knows who left them. Now, something I wanted to point out is that all of these have a healthy layer of patina on them. You can particularly see it where the water comes down, where it's extra brown. But as you look over here, you can see it's more white, meaning it was carved more recently. Now, if Paul Bergen is to be believed, and I checked out his social media, he used to work for a government contractor out of Hill Air Force Base in the local area, I believe he's reputable and he wouldn't just lie for fun. And it, appears to say I heart, and this would be the signature of Moroni, and that's at least what is to be said. Down in Chalk Creek, they say it's a signature of Moroni. Not positive, I believe, that, he came through here. But it's still an interesting petroglyph panel. Of course, I tend to more believe what Dan Lowe says, but whatever you want to believe, it's fascinating and it's worth the hike. And this is about how you get to the Ogden petroglyphs. You come right up this road, which is 24th Street, through Ogden. You head to that parking lot, and the hike is much easier than it looks. You come up to this rock, which is kind of arched over. I'll show that here. And then from that rock, you just walk right up here to this grotto of rocks. And it's kind of a little bit obscured. Excuse my tripod there. I'm going to try not to fall. It's good I came out here this early, right before the snow falls, and it's actually still possible to access. There's the petroglyph panel, and apparently, according to Paul Bergen, when he was here in the 1950s, and the last he saw of it was the 1960s, there was a structure right back here that was kind of circular, and it was pretty tall. It looked kind of like a kiva, which you would see down west, and it would have kind of butted right up against us, but there was a keyhole that was looking right over this from this structure. So if you were in that structure, you would see the petroglyphs, and you would be looking right over the Great Salt Lake. In fact, I believe out there, for a little bit of reference, you can see Antelope Island, and I think this island right here, correct me if I'm wrong, is Fremont Island. And he said that these probably would have moved a little bit over the years because there were large earthquakes, you know, hundreds of years ago. But that's Paul Bergen's theory, because he believes these are hundreds of years old. Dan Lowe believes they were left by the Knights of the Golden Circle. Either way, a very, very interesting story overlooking Ogden that not many people see. And while I walk down, I might as well mention, Utah is very famous for their legends of Spanish gold mines. I've talked about that subject with Dan Lowe quite a number of times. And these legends kind of come from, it's commonly accepted, and it is historic fact, that Dominguez and Escalante visited this territory in 1776, and they actually passed through the Uinta Mountains and came most likely through that canyon that's just around the corner here. And as they came through, they remarked in their journals that there were remains of mine tailings. There were irrigation ditches, the kind you would find in Pima, which is, you know, southern Arizona, where they actually had a farming culture, something that the Utes and the Timpanogos didn't have when they came through here. So the earliest conjecture of sort of hidden cultures or forgotten civilizations was made by Dominguez and Escalante all the way back in 1776. And to imagine mine tailings and old Spanish mines, because the Spanish came here and of course they said there's already mines here, so they used them up. And there's plenty of petroglyphs as well that depict Native Americans with metal headdresses and metal plates on, and they are period accurate. They are accepted as, I believe, Fremont culture petroglyphs, and they're up at McConkey Ranch. I've done a video about that. But what culture made it? What purpose it served? Did Moroni come here and leave his signature on that rock? Was it made by pioneers as a lark? Who knows? But a good story is a good story, and a good hike is a good hike.